Shocking truth: did God create evil? The dark revelation your pastor never told you. In the quiet town of Willow Creek, whispers echoed through shadowy alleys and behind closed doors. A strange darkness had settled over the congregations, feeding the fear that something sinister lurked beneath their holy teachings. Every Sunday, Reverend Milton's voice rang out with fervent passion, but what if the message he preached was woven with threads of deceit? What had he hidden from his fervent flock? Beneath the comforting steeple, a chilling truth clawed its way closer, threatening to tear apart everything they believed. Was evil truly born of humanity? Or had something far more sinister played a hand in their fate? It started one fateful afternoon when a local librarian, Mrs. Hargrove, stumbled upon an ancient tome tucked away in a dusty corner. Its pages, old and fragile, felt electric as she turned them. The words spilled out dark prophecies and astonishing claims, a direct challenge to the very foundations of what the town held sacred. Mrs. Hargrove's trembling hands, as she skimmed the pages, felt the heaviest burden of knowledge, the kind that kept you up at night, swirling with uncertainty and dread. As she gasped at a particularly harrowing passage, the air in the library turned thick, almost suffocating, teasing the corners of her mind with panic. Days went by, and rumors of the book spread like wildfire. People whispered in hushed tones, "Did you hear?" Mrs. Hargrove said, "It speaks of a celestial war," their eyes wide with a mixture of thrill and terror. The town square buzzed with an electric tension. Children were warned not to play near the library. Locals began to question each other, voices tense and accusatory, faces tight with disbelief. Could our God, could he truly be the architect of darkness? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash the like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. Amidst the frenzy, a midnight gathering was planned, a council of the fearful, where the townsfolk could voice their concerns and query the unthinkable. Curious eyes and anxious hearts would converge, eager to find answers. But with each passing hour, the unease grew. Would this meeting uncover secrets or expose them to an evil they'd never before imagined? As darkness enveloped Willow Creek, their fates hung by a thread. And when the clock struck 12, a scream shattered the silence, echoing through the town like a clarion call. What would they discover about their God, and the true nature of the darkness they felt creeping into their lives? The air crackled with the weight of unanswered questions. The scream dissolved into the night, a haunting echo that ricocheted off the cracked walls of the church. Reverend Milton stood frozen at the pulpit, eyes wide with fear, his hands trembling as they gripped the edges of the wooden lectern. The candle flames flickered, casting frantic shadows on the faces of the anxious townsfolk gathered in the dimly lit room. Each face reflected horror, disbelief, and a growing urge to flee or fight against the tide of uncertainty. What was that? A voice from the back broke the suffocating silence, laced with panic. Murmurs began to ripple through the group, a tide of rising fears threatening to drown out their need for answers. The air felt thick, electric, as dark thoughts twisted among them. Was it a warning? A premonition of the chaos unraveling their tightly knit community? Before anyone could respond, Mrs. Hargrove stood, her eyes wild, her hair disheveled as if she had just stepped out of a nightmare. It's the book. The ancient tome, it bears the mark of malice. We're in danger. Her voice was tremulous yet urgent, sending another wave of shivers down the spines of her fellow townsfolk. A man, a farmer named Jacob, whose hands were calloused from years of toil, leapt to his feet, his expression muddy with anger. You talk of danger, but what do you really know? Your obsession with that book has put us all at risk. We're a town of faith, not of fear. The room erupted in chaos. Some agreed with Jacob, gripping the threads of their faith like lifelines, while others leaned closer to Mrs. Hargrove, desperate to unravel the terrifying mystery she had unearthed. A cacophony of voices erupted into a whirlwind of accusations, justifying their fears and questioning their beliefs, and then, just as the tumult gained momentum, a long shadow fell over the gathering, silencing the clamor. Reverend Milton, his voice dropping to a whisper, commanded their attention. "Please, everyone listen. We must understand what we're dealing with. We cannot let this fear tear us apart." Suddenly, an unearthly voice pierced through the crowd, deep and resonant, as if emerging from the very depths of the book's dark pages. "You are all blinded by your ignorance." It boomed, sending shudders throughout the room. Eyes darted around nervously, searching for the source of the voice, but no one was there. As the air thickened with unease, Mrs. Hargrove's face blanched. "Know its beginning," she uttered softly, her eyes wide with the terror of realization. A collective gasp rippled through the group. Could it be what she had read? Was the darkness actually alive? Panic set in, and people surged forward, desperate to escape the church. But before they could break free of their collective dread, the ground beneath them trembled. Dust and debris fell from the ceiling as the lights flickered violently. Reverend Milton's eyes darted back to the tome, now resting heavily in Mrs. Hargrove's arms. "What does it say? What does it want from us?" The desperation in his voice hung in the air like a thick fog. Mrs. Hargrove's heart thumped as she opened the book, revealing scribbles and symbols that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. In the fragile glow of candlelight, a new sense of urgency swept through the crowd. "It says the time has come for choices to be made, and redemption or damnation awaits those who defy the darkness." As her voice trailed off, the air turned frigid, and a chilling revelation hung like a storm cloud over Willow Creek. What price would they pay for the truth? How much longer can we ignore it? Someone whispered, fear creeping into their tone. With each heartbeat, the sense of doom deepened, enveloping the town in a shroud of uncertainty. The tremors ceased, but in its wake, a profound silence emerged, resonating with the weight of expectation. Outside, in the pitch blackness, shadows moved, a collective force waiting, watching. The question lingered, how much darkness had already seeped into their souls? Would they confront it, or would they fall deeper into its embrace? The boundaries of faith were about to be shattered, and all that remained was the clock ticking ominously toward dawn. A suffocating stillness enveloped the church, a web of tension thick enough to choke. Reverend Milton felt the weight of the townsfolk's fear crush his chest. He opened his mouth to speak, but the scorching urgency of their collective panic filled the air, drowning out reason. Eyes darted from Mrs. Hargrove to the tome, uncertain as shadows flickered like restless spirits. "We must focus," he shouted, voice cracking. "This darkness, whatever it is, will not win if we stand together." But the crowd was already fracturing. Some clawed their way toward the exits, driven by an instinct to escape, while others remained rooted, drawn to the mystery of the tome as if it hummed with an unholy charm. The crackle of fear twisted into whispers, questions clawing for attention. "What if it's true?" Someone gasped from the back, face pale, lips trembling. "What if the book holds the key to everything we've feared? More like the key to our doom." Jacob barked, his voice a jagged edge cutting through the tension. "Stop this madness. It could be a trick, a lie meant to unravel us." Across the room, Mrs. Hargrove clutched the tome to her chest, her knuckles white, jaw set firm despite the trembling shadows around her. "It's not just a book," she breathed, the words barely escaping her lips. "It's a vessel, a bridge to what lies beyond." With each phrase, the atmosphere shifted, thickening like syrup. Reverend Milton's heart raced, pulse pounding in his ears. "Then we need to confront it," he urged, desperation clawing at his throat. "We have to know what we're dealing with before it consumes us whole." But the whispers grew louder, each fear amplified, a drumbeat of panic. "We don't need to know. We should destroy it. Burn it and end whatever curse it brings." "Are we so quick to abandon our faith?" replied a woman, her voice shaking, mingling doubt with conviction. "What if the power to defeat it lies within us?" Again the air trembled, this time not with fear, but with something darker surfacing, a sense of ancient conflict rippling through their hearts. Raw emotion painted their faces, betrayal, desperation, and an awakening dread. Outside, the wind howled, as if echoing their inner turmoil. Mrs. Hargrove, emboldened by their tumult, lifted the tome high, her voice a clarion call. "Listen to its message. It speaks of light and shadow, of choices that bind us. Redemption is possible if we dare to face the truth. It holds miracles and nightmares alike. Suddenly, the candles flickered violently, and a frozen air swept through the hall, snuffing out each flame in succession. Gasps escaped lips in unison, plunging them into darkness. Panic ignited as dread filled the void, and before anyone could react, a pungent odor of charred leaves and decay seeped into the air. The pulpit creaked under Reverend Milton's trembling hands. "Trust in your faith," he shouted against the growing chaos, though his heart echoed with a haunting fear. "Together, we can face this darkness. We will not be." A blinding flash illuminated the room, snapping everyone's attention toward the gaping door. As the light receded, a figure stood there, cloaked in shadows, its eyes glimmering like coals. "The book knows you," it rasped, each syllable dripping with malice. "And it waits, it craves your fear." No one breathed. Time seemed to stretch. Was that the voice from earlier or something worse? What had they unleashed? As raw terror gripped the townsfolk, realization dawned amidst their fear. With the figure in the doorway, the lines between salvation and horror blurred. The price to pay for truth was sharper than they ever imagined. "Run!" Jacob yelled, shattering the silence, but something deep inside commanded them to stay. How could they flee from what they didn't fully understand? The figure stepped forward, bathed in a sinister glow, and darkness swirled around it like a storm. And just as it whispered the words destined to fracture their very souls, the tormented chant began to rise from the grave. Join us. What awaited them on the other side of that threshold? Hope or horror? In the grips of cold dread, the townsfolk understood their choice was moments away. Will they face the shrouded truth, or will they surrender to the encroaching darkness threatening to swallow them whole? The time for decision loomed like an approaching storm, and the book's whisper beckoned like a siren's call, leaving only one question to ponder: what lies beyond the choices they must make? The figure took another slow step forward, and the air filled with an ominous chill that sent shivers racing down spines. With every movement, shadows writhed around its form, twisting, curling, as if alive. Reverend Milton's heart hammered painfully in his chest, the weight of dread settling even deeper as anticipation hung like a noose. "What do you want?" someone finally cried, voice cracking, the lone question pulling at the anxiety-stained silence. The figure paused, its glowing eyes narrowing as it surveyed the trembling crowd. "I come for what you fear most," it said, voice a chilling whisper that slashed through the air like a serrated blade. "Each of you holds shadows that you hide. It is time to release them, to embrace your truth." Gasps swept through the room, and faces turned white with horror. People exchanged frantic glances, eyes reflecting the unwelcome realization that the darkness spoke not just to fears but to the burdens they thought were buried deep. Their pasts, their doubts, their sins, it all surged to the surface in that one painful breath. "You toy with us!" Jacob shouted, suddenly bold. "You think to tear us apart?" "On the contrary," the figure replied, tilting its head slightly, amusement flaring in its voice. "I offer freedom. The tome you covet reveals what binds you. Unravel the chains. Surrender to the darkness, and I will show you who you truly are." Reverend Milton felt the edges of his vision closing in, the monstrous nature of the figure taunting him like a hangman's noose. "Don't listen!" he yelled, desperation echoing in his voice. "We stand together against this." The atmosphere seemed to shift with those words, and for a moment, a flicker of resolve spread through the townsfolk. Their unity, however fragile, became a flicker of light, pushing back against the encroaching shadows. But it was brief. It hung in the air before the figure's laughter, harsh and mocking. "Faith alone cannot save you," it hissed, dark joy spilling from its lips. "You crave truth, but truth is a mirror. What do you see? Inwardly, you are as broken as your town." The figure gestured toward the tome, the sheer weight of its presence amplifying the silence. Mrs. Hargrove, grappling with doubt and hope, stepped forward clutching the book. "We are not broken. We are fighting. We believe." "Belief?" the figure echoed, voice layered with disdain. "What has it given you? Look how faith falters under pressure, how it leads to chaos. Surrendering to fear is not weakness, it is freedom. What do you choose?" A shudder ran through the group. Horror and fascination mingled in the air like smoke from a dying fire. It was a choice, illuminated by the flickering candlelight that still cast shadows in the corners of despair. "Trust in God," the Reverend cried out, though his voice wavered. "Trust in each other, we can overcome this together." But as he spoke, he felt a tremor in his own faith as it collided with the darkness growing within him. The figure's gaze seemed to penetrate his soul, and he fought to hold on to hope even as doubt whispered deceitfully. Suddenly, a low rumble echoed outside the church, shaking the foundations. The ground quaked as if the earth itself was shuddering at their desperate plight. Panic returned. Those who had been tempted to stay rooted in faith began to inch toward the exits, eyes wide with the primal fear that surged through the crowd. "Make your choice," the figure called out, voice now a commanding roar. "Face the truth, or flee from it. If you wish to know the dark, step forward." As the last flickers of candlelight danced their way into the void, each townsfolk faced a decision that could alter everything. Would they find empowerment in the darkness, or would they retreat, leaving their fate unknown in the shadows? With breaths held and hearts racing, they hesitated, teetering on a fragile thread. What choice would lead them back to the light? Or would they step into a darkness that promised to reveal their deepest fears? And as the ground beneath them shuddered once more, a dreadful clarity began to emerge. The true horror may lie not in what awaited them outside, but within. As the figure inched closer and the crowd shuddered at the precipice of despair, a haunting whisper returned, a promise of savagery and solace. Would they submit to the beckoning call, or would they hold their ground against the tide of their own darkness? The murmur of fear rippled through the crowd like an electric current, each face caught in a mesh of terror and confusion. With the figure looming larger, the tension began to twist like a vice around their throats. Reverend Milton's desperate plea echoed in the stillness, but as moments passed, he sensed the resolution of the townsfolk waver. People looked at each other, uncertain and desperate. "What if it's true?" someone whispered, the words barely audible but sharp enough to cut through the thick air. Fear gripped Milton's heart as the weight of their doubts began to pull them apart, their collective strength ebbing away like a receding tide. The figure remained unmoved, absorbing their dread with an insatiable hunger. "You cannot escape what is inside you," it taunted, its voice slithering through the cracks in the church's silence. "Those shadows were born from your own hands. Embrace them. They are the truth you seek." Mrs. Hargrove's knuckles whitened around the tome. "We refuse to live in fear. We will not give ourselves to darkness." Her voice trembled, though determination flickered in her eyes. "Ah, the brave but foolish," the figure laughed, its sound hollow and derisive. "Your courage is that of borrowed time. Make no mistake, you're not fighting me. You fight yourselves." The temperature in the church plummeted, and a gust of wind swept through the doors, rattling the stained glass windows. Milton shivered as it tugged at his very essence. Memories, fears, and regrets crashed over him like a tidal wave, moments of failure, doubt, sins he'd tried to forget. He struggled to focus on Mrs. Hargrove's courage. There had to be strength in togetherness, but the figure's words gnawed at him, festering in the recesses of his mind. "If you step forward into the dark," the figure continued, its voice weaving a spell around them, "I will unwrap the bindings of your souls. You shall see how you represent the very fear you so desperately hide. Wouldn't you want to know the truth?" As the tremors of dread rolled through the crowd, Reverend Milton felt the sharp pang of despair tighten around his heart. The hesitant townsfolk, caught in the gravitational pull of the figure's promise, began to trade glances that begged for answers. "Make your choice." The figure roared once more, compelling some to falter, their feet inching ever closer to the shadows pooling at the base of its form. A frantic murmur rose, escalating like a tide. "What if our truth sets us free? What if we let it out?" Jacob's voice cut through. Each word was a stone skipping across the surface of their shared consciousness, rippling outward, sparking doubt and curiosity. The pulsing dread in the air intensified. Milton's voice trembled as he shouted, "You're succumbing to its deception." He fought for captivation, but it felt futile as the flicker of faith began to extinguish in their eyes. And then came the scream, piercing through the cacophony, a sound choked with turmoil and fear. It was Sarah, a girl from the back. "What if darkness is all we have left? What if it's our only truth?" The silence that followed was deafening. Each heart in the room seemed to skip a beat, holding its breath as faces turned toward Sarah. In that moment, the figure transformed, its grin widening and free from malice. It had struck a chord of deep and haunting truth. The irreversible pull of surrender was tempting. "Come forward, child." It beckoned, pure delight exuding from its form. "Together, we shall unveil the spectacle of who you truly are." As Sarah stepped forward, the surrounding darkness began to ripple unnaturally, swallowing the light whole. The townsfolk gasped, fear electrified the air, leaving them paralyzed, teetering on the brink of surrender or salvation. The ground shook once more, and Reverend Milton reached out. "No! Stop her!" But the cry was swallowed by the looming shadow. As the figure dissolved into the gathering darkness, reality fractured. The town's past, secrets, and hidden truths loomed ominously over them like a storm, ready to break and unleash what lay dormant. Could they intervene before it was too late? Or would they watch as the futility of their protective faith crumbled into surrender? The next moment could reshape them forever. What horrors awaited as their deepest fears unfurled? And could they survive the catharsis of revelation, or would they succumb to the very darkness that had haunted them all along? The shadows shifted, a living thing wrapping around Sarah as she moved forward. A stark chill cut through the air, leaving everyone breathless. Milton's heart raced, each pulse screaming that this was no ordinary confrontation. The gaze of the crowd fractured, eyes darting from one person to another, faces marred by growing unease. "Stop!" Milton yelled again, desperation spilling into his voice. "You don't know what you're doing." He saw the light of reason dimming in their eyes, smothered by the beguiling darkness that promised awakening. Sarah paused, uncertainty flickering across her young face. For a heartbeat, the filled sanctuary stood on the edge of decision. Was she brave, or was she naive? The figure leaned closer, gentle as a whisper. "You seek answers, young one. They are not as far away as you think," it promised, its voice now soft and inviting, drawing her into its embrace. "Remember the moments," it continued, pulling at the threads of memory. "All the pain, the guilt, the laughter veiled by sorrow. This is your truth." The townsfolk gasped, caught in memories they had buried deep. Milton felt their hearts falter as repressed fears clawed their way to the surface. He saw Mrs. Hargrove's face contort, caught between desire and despair. "We can't feed it," she cried, her hands trembling with resolve. "Fighting fear gives it power. We must stand together." But the seductive allure of the figure held sway, and whispers of doubt wove through the crowd, insistent and slithering. "What if you'll never know? What if the truth lies in the shadows? There is strength in surrender. It'll cost you." Milton interjected, voice rising, ardor blazing in his chest. "You will lose yourselves in that darkness. Do not be lulled." Jacob stepped forward, brow furrowed. "But what if we find our freedom there?" His voice rumbled, deep and troubled. The crowd murmured in agreement, hands falling to their sides as uncertainty grew. "It feeds on your fear," Milton pressed, desperation bleeding into each word. "We rise or fall as one. Look around you." He gestured emphatically. "This is our home. Nothing can destroy us, but ourselves." Yet their resolve weakened, and Milton felt it. That flicker of hope he fought to fan flared beneath their collective doubt, sputtering against the overwhelming darkness that promised understanding. Like a glimmering raindrop on a hot pave, it faded rapidly. "Your pastor lies," the figure hissed, riling the air thick with accusation. "You worship a deity who feeds on your fears, actively holding you back from true enlightenment. Isn't a time to face what you hide?" An icy dread spread through Milton, and he saw the question in their eyes. Could they be right? Were they betraying their trusting instincts for a chance at liberation? The figure seized the moment, weaving its spell tighter, each word a venomous whisper in their minds. Inside him, hope teetered on a knife's edge. "This is madness," he yelled, attempting to cut through the chaos. With every syllable, he felt the crowd tense, confused, and the figure pulsating with sinister delight. He took a step forward, but the shadows pushed back. "We can stand against it. We can face the darkness together." And then chaos erupted. Sarah jerked back, hesitation boiling in her chest, and the spectral figure roared in anger, the darkness swirling like living smoke. Foolish mortals! Embrace it or suffer the consequences. It threatened, the room trembling with its command. The wind howled through the church, swirling around them, and Milton felt the very foundations of faith quaking, their collective decision weighed heavy. Milton felt the pressure mount a fork in the road where fear met courage, darkness embraced light. What choice would they make? With one final push, Milton shouted one last plea. Your truth is not shackles. Don't let fear ravage your hearts. But as he spoke, an undeniable truth loomed, and doubt tangled thickly in their minds. The darkness evolved, and the figure closed in, promising untold freedom. Shadows danced wildly, spiraling out of control. As the congregation seemed to inch toward surrender, Milton's thoughts raced. Would they break apart from the force of their fears? Or would the town succumb to the insatiable grasp of the figure that thrived on chaos? He took a breath, aware it all came down to the next moment. The ground shook beneath them, as if the earth itself was preparing to swallow whole the very fabric of their existence. Then came the deafening silence. A stillness heavier than the air, holding them captive. What awaited them as they stood at the precipice? Would they unite to fight the clawing darkness, or allow their insecurities to seal their fate? The shadows whispered, eager for blood, and the first move was yet to be made. The stillness shattered like glass. A scream erupted from Sarah, cutting through the tension like a knife. No! She cried, wrenching herself from the figure's grip. The shadows that had seemed to cocoon her fell away, revealing her vulnerability before the thrumming chaos. The crowd gasped collectively, faces filled with horror and disbelief. Sarah! Milton shouted, lunging forward. His heart raced, each beat pounding a desperate rhythm. She steadied herself, her eyes wide with realization but flickering with remnants of doubt. Yes, right. How can we trust what we don't know? The spectral figure shifted, coiling back like a serpent ready to pounce. It loomed taller, stretching its shadowy limbs toward the ceiling, dark tendrils flickering like candle flames in the wind. Why cling to your weakened beliefs? It taunted, voice dripping with challenge. Here lies your freedom. What of your fears, your past torments? Would you remain shackled? Freedom? At what cost? Milton's voice thundered in defiance. What you call freedom is a prison of despair. We will not submit to your lies. Figures around him began to waver, the allure of dark enlightenment whispering temptations too sweet. Faces changed, expressions flickering between light and darkness like a faulty bulb. He saw it in Jacob's eyes, a hunger for understanding that drew him to that seductive shadow. Jacob, don't! Milton reached out, the two men locked in a silent struggle. You'll lose yourself. The moment you believe their lies, you'll be lost forever. I need to know. Jacob's fists clenched, his body tense. What if letting go is the only way to find the truth? Only the truth can set you free. Milton countered, the foundations of both their destinies balanced precariously on the edge of that moment. The walls pulsated as the darkness thickened, wrapping around them like a sinister fog. Shadows danced in a wicked ballet above, creating shapes of despair, memories twisted into grotesque forms. Gasps filled the air as patrons recoiled, fear clawing at their hearts like a ravenous beast. Join us! The figure crooned, a velvet hiss that sent shivers through the crowd. Embrace your darkness, and you shall rise anew. Shed your fears, let go of the shackles that bind your souls. The figure's grip tightened on Jacob, swaying him further into the abyss. What if we could discover a power far greater than what we've ever known? No! Milton pressed through gritted teeth, his eyes darting among the captive audience. You think surrender brings strength? It strips you bare. You'll be a puppet, dancing to their dark tune. Fight it. Stand firm. Isn't it time to leave pain behind? Jacob's voice quivered, hitting Milton like a blow. Anguish wrapped around their shared history, a life woven with grief and regret. In that moment, doubt seeped into Milton's heart, but then he noticed Sarah again. She stood apart, an island amidst a raging sea. Clarity burned bright in her eyes. We can't sacrifice who we are to find the truth, she declared boldly, stepping toward Milton. The figure recoiled, swaying angrily, shadows darting like lost spirits protesting. Foolish girl! You cling to your ignorance. Join the revival or drown in doubt. It shrieked, a wail of desperation lacing its voice. The air grew thick with tension, the congregation torn. Milton stepped forward, igniting a flicker of resistance in their souls. If we face this together, we can uncover the truths of our past without paying the price in sacrifice. Let your love shine brighter than fear. A faint murmur rippled through the crowd, a gentle rebellion emerging against the shadowy tides. Yet, anxious whispers floated above the clamor, planting seeds of fear that twisted and turned. The ground trembled again, surging with malevolence, as the figure gathered its strength. You will regret this choice, it warned, a promise that hovered in the air like smoke. What would happen next? Would fear bury them, or would they rise as one, hearts burning with courage and resolve? As silence fell once more, one thing became apparent: the battle had just begun. And darkness wouldn't yield quietly. I am the fray. A single question ignited a question that would unravel everything. How far would they go to uncover their true selves, and were they ready for the revelations that lay beneath the veil of shadows? The darkness pressed on them like a heavy cloak, suffocating yet strangely electrifying. Milton could feel his heart racing, not just for himself but for everyone caught in its grasp. He glanced at Sarah. She stood unwavering, defiance radiating from her in waves. Everyone! Together! Milton shouted, the urgency rising in his voice. We can't let this shadow take us down. Look around. This is our moment. But a few still gasped, their faces twisted in fear. Jacob's gaze flickered from Milton to the figure, torn. I don't know what to believe. He shouted back, confusion and desperation splintering his voice. What if he is telling the truth? Truth? Nothing that manipulates your fears can ever be the truth. Milton shot back, trying to reach him. The air crackled and shimmered, a riot of conflicting energies swirling around them. The spectral figure seethed with rage, its dark limbs coiling tighter around Jacob, as if aiming to crush not just his body but his very essence. This is your last chance. It hissed, the air around it vibrating with its sinister power. Surrender, and all your pain will be washed away. With a sudden burst of determination, Sarah stepped forward, pulling Milton with her. We will not be your puppets, she declared, her voice rising above the chaos. We're stronger than you think. The crowd swayed. Some held on to hope, while others teetered on the edge of despair. Whispers erupted, filled with both encouragement and doubt. Let us do this. Someone shouted from the back, igniting a flicker of solidarity. Milton focused on the swirling shadows, pulling his energy inward. On the count of 3. We do this together. He yelled. 1, 2, 3. They all shouted, a chorus of defiance. With that unified shout, something shifted. The shadows recoiled, as if they were struck. The figure's face twisted in rage. Fools! It screamed, but its voice faltered, uncertainty creeping in. Milton took a deep breath, summoning all his courage. Now, remember who you are. Remember who we are. The ground trembled, and the atmosphere crackled with potential. The fear that had held them captive began to melt away, replaced with a fierce light that cut through the darkness like a beacon. Jacob, torn between fear and newfound resolve, stepped forward, finally breaking free from the figure's grip. No more. I choose clarity. Behind him, the other figures caught in the shadows seemed to awaken as well. Eyes brightened, fists clenched, faces set with determination. Those who floundered outside the shadows found their voices and began chanting, a fervent rhythm rising like a heartbeat. Together! 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 The figure writhed in anguish, its shadowy form flickering violently. You think you can fight me? It screeched. You are nothing without your pain. Stand tall. Milton shouted back. We are more than our fears. We are not defined by what haunts us. In that moment, the shadows hesitated, wavering as if caught in the sunlight of their resolve. But as the crowd surged forward, Milton felt a tremor beneath his feet, an ominous sign that they were far from safe. The ground opened up, threatening to swallow them whole. The darkness was roiling, wild and desperate, as it clashed against the light they created. "Hold the line!" Sarah yelled, her voice piercing through the growing chaos. "We've come too far to turn back." But the figure was desperate now, its twisted form transforming and stretching as it fought against its own unraveling influence. "You will regret this defiance. I will return, and when I do, you will wish you'd embraced the dark." Milton's breath quickened. "We'll be ready. We will never back down." As the figure howled in defeat, the ground swallowed it further, and Milton felt their light strengthen. They had won this battle, but what lay ahead? As silence settled like a thick fog, uncertainty loomed like a shadow. Unanswered questions hung heavy in the air. Were they truly free? Or had they merely postponed the inevitable confrontation? How long could they hold the darkness at bay? The battle had indeed begun, but would they be ready when it returned with vengeance? The ground shuddered, pulling the echoes of their victory deep into the earth. Milton glanced at Sarah, heart pounding, eyes wide. The silence felt like a living entity, pressing against them, daring them to make a sound, to show fear. The shadows that had been their foe lay still, yet the feeling of dread still hung thick in the air. "Did we really win?" Jacob whispered, stepping back, almost instinctively trying to get as far from the shadows as possible. The relief that flooded some faces began to shift, warping back into uncertainty. Milton shook his head, trying to dispel doubt. "We held it back. That's what matters. Right?" Sarah's fingers clenched into fists, determination radiating from her once more. "We have to stay strong. We've tasted victory, we just need to build on it." But even as she spoke, a low rumble resonated beneath their feet, growing louder, angrier. The ground started to tremble again, like the fury of a caged beast preparing to lash out. Milton felt an icy grip around his heart. What if it wasn't over? "Everyone! We need to move!" he shouted, urgency flooding his words. Panic flickered in a few eyes. They needed to decide quickly. As if sensing their hesitation, the darkness began to swirl again, this time creating shapes, words, taunts, and shadows of memories that haunted each person. Milton felt the bite of regret mix with the sweat on his brow. "They're not just shadows, they're memories. Don't look at it!" Sarah screamed, arms outstretched as if to shield them. "Focus your thoughts. Push past." But the figure loomed larger, its form shifting, mocking each individual fear, each doubt they harbored. It wrapped around them like a cold, bitter wind. "Look upon me. I am your pain, your grief, your failures. Remember me." The whispers clawed at their psyche, dredging up memories buried deep. Milton could see Jacob's face paling as past shadows flickered across him, mistakes he had made, words left unsaid. "No!" A voice from behind him erupted, a woman he vaguely recognized. "We can't let it get to us. We face our shadows. Together." The new chant began to rise, battling against the seductive pull of fear. "Face it. Face it. Face it." Milton took a deep breath, his voice rising above the others. "Every scar, every wound, we don't hide from them. We wear them. They've made us who we are." The figure twisted, writhing in rage. "You think they make you strong? They only bind you tighter to the dark." As if realizing the truth in Milton's words, the crowd began to roar, empowered. "No! We are not bound. We are free. Together." Suddenly, a blinding light erupted from the center of their unity, illuminating everything around them. The light pushed against the shadows, forcing them to contract. The echoes faded, and the memories began to dissolve into nothingness, but the ground still shook violently, and from deep below, a loud crack split the chaos, a jagged line of darkness sliced through their unity. Milton's heart raced as pieces of earth fell away, creating a chasm that threatened to open beneath them. "Run! We have to get to safety!" Milton yelled, heart pounding as he grabbed Sarah's hand, but as they turned, the shadow swirled again, this time closing in like a serpent ready to strike. You think you can hide? I am your past, the figure hissed. Milton stumbled, and the voices of his friends echoed in his mind. Would they make it? Could they truly escape this darkness that threatened to consume them? Help us! He shouted, fear prickling at the edges of his mind, but they were racing toward an uncertain future. The chant faded into the background, blurring into a chaotic roar as they sprinted through the chaos. But as they approached the edge of safety, a scream pierced through the noise. Someone was gone, swallowed by the darkness. Who was it? Sarah gasped, horror-stricken as she turned back. Milton's chest twisted. Had they lost one of their own to the very shadows they fought? The realization hit him harder than the cold grip of the dark that clawed at his heels. The battle raged on, but this time, it was no longer just about survival, it was about rescue. They had to choose who they were willing to fight for and who they could save before the darkness crept in again, but as they neared the precipice, one haunting question remained: what if they weren't fighting just for themselves, but against something much more powerful? Could they ever truly escape the shadows, or was the fight only beginning? The fight for Willow Creek reached its boiling point as the darkness spun around them, twisting and clinging like a fog desperate to consume. Milton felt the weight of panic pressing down on his chest, heart racing, breath quickening. They had to stand together. He pulled Sarah closer, their fingers gripping tightly, anchoring each other against the swirling storm. The figure towered above them, its shadow stretching wide, eyes glowing with malice and hunger. You cannot escape your past. Each of you carries your chains. Break free, and I shall set you free. It roared, voice echoing ominously like thunder in the night. No! Milton shouted defiantly, shaking off the tendrils of doubt that crawled over him. We are more than our fears. We create our truth together. The crowd began to rally behind him. Together! 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 They called, voices rising, breaking through the tidal wave of despair. Foolish mortals! The figure hissed, its voice laced with venom. You think your unity can save you from yourselves? I will feast on your surrender. But as the shadows pressed in, Milton seized the moment, stepping forward, calling for strength from those around him. We surrender. Look around. Let us remember our loves, our hopes, our true selves. The darkness may whisper, but we drown it out with our light. Remnants of doubt crackled like static in the air. Threads of fear still bound them, yet the fire of defiance began to stoke flames of hope. One by one, faces lit up with understanding. The darkness writhed in agitation, its form shifting and bubbling like oil in water. I see you. Sarah yelled, her voice breaking through the chaos, raw with determination. Our flaws make us human. We hide them. We embrace them. And with her words, a wave of resolve surged through the crowd, electrifying the air. Stand strong, Willow Creek. Unshackle yourselves. Milton yelled, his voice booming with passion. It worked together, hand in hand, they inched forward, marching toward the dark figure like a bulwark of light. Shadows recoiled, revealing the ground beneath them, now shimmering as if lit by 1,000 tiny stars. What do you choose? The figure bellowed, its anger morphing into desperation. Embrace me. You cannot hide, you win. No longer just a town, they were a force fused by hope. We see the truth, and we stand united. Jacob shouted, stepping forward. Fear had held him for too long. Our shadows don't define us, they guide us. Others echoed, words cascading like a waterfall of freedom. Then the unexpected happened. A fissure opened in the dark figure, and brilliant light burst through, wrapping around the townsfolk. The scream of fury and anguish erupted from the shadow, raw and echoing, but they stood resolute against the encroaching storm. Light your path with love. Milton shouted, his heart surging as he rallied everyone together. Their combined strength was palpable, like an unstoppable force pushing against the dark. The illumination began to spread, invading the very essence of the darkness. No! The figure shrieked, but it was too late. Light weaved through the shadow like a roaring tide, washing over every dark corner and crevice of their fears. Together! They chanted. As their individual spirits connected, they felt the light surge even brighter, engulfing them all. Each shadow melted away, and gasps of surrender turned to triumphant laughter. The figure as formed twisted agonizingly as the light erupted with a final crack of brilliance, scattering the darkness like ashes in the wind. Silence settled afterward, reverberating like a distant bell. They stood breathless, surrounded by warmth, bathing in the bittersweet afterglow of freedom and truth. Now woven into their collective fabric, they had faced the darkness and emerged not just alive but reborn, limbs unshackled and hearts bold. Milton glanced at Sarah, then around at the crowd, relief filling him as appreciation swelled. They had defeated the shadows, but the journey was far from over. Echoes of their victory lingered, but so did questions. Never again, Jacob whispered, voice trembling slightly. Will we forget the lessons of the darkness? Together, we can find a way forward, Sarah assured, her eyes glimmering with hope. Looking directly at Milton, Milton took a deep breath. The shimmer of a new dawn cast hues of gold over Willow Creek. Yes, together, he affirmed, heart brimming with invigorating faith. We are stronger now than we've ever been. And as they stepped back into the light, embracing what lay ahead, the shadows receded into distant memory. They had uncovered their truths, faced the darkness, and emerged transformed, understanding that the journey to navigate life's complexities revealed strength. Together and now, a community reborn, they promised to carry their light against any forthcoming dark. It would forever whisper its temptation, but they knew now, only truth and love, united, held enough power to keep the shadows at bay. Yet even as they ventured forward, one lingering thought wafted through the air, a distant echo of the darkness they had transcended. And in that moment of peace, a warning loomed in the distance. The battle could rise again, but only they held the choice to face it. If you enjoyed this story, you need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't miss out on our next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm. And flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about the ending. Share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share. Your support matters.